Welcome to the Introduction to TESS training session. This is a recorded version of the session that we do live on Tuesday evenings. You can register from our homepage at traveleasolutions.com.
Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is clients. Clients are really important. The system is built around your clients. So we'll focus on clients to begin with. And we'll create a couple of clients from scratch. I'll also show you how to import your clients to save some time later, but we'll start with the basics first. First name and last name are the only things that are required. I'm going to put in a couple of things that aren't required. Just so we have some information for later in the session. Okay, of course, you'd want to put in as much information as you have. Particularly email address is important. And that's the basics. Like I said, first name and last name are the only things that are required, but to get the most out of your clients and be able to follow up with them and market to them, you want to have information in there. We will never market to your clients. Your clients are your clients. We just help you get information to them. Going to the tracking tab next, and we'll look at relatives. Now, this is one area where TESS might be a little bit different than systems that you've used in the past. If you've ever used another travel-focused CRM, and many of those relatives aren't clients themselves, they're just attached to your primary client. But that's a little bit different in TESS. In TESS, your relatives are clients, or your clients' relatives are clients. So anywhere you have a traveler or a client box, you can just start typing in their name and it will search to see if they're already in there. If they aren't there, you just click create a new one. And if you have more information, you can enter it there and then save that. So now this is a link. If we click on Tom, you can see that we have all the same options available for Tom that we had available for Tammy. I think we named our first client. We can give him a phone number. We also have this additional notes section here. This is just the top things that you need to know when you're talking to your client. So it might be something like always flies first class, or has a peanut allergy, or flies with a pet. Just the little bit of information that's really important when you're working with that client. And if we go to the tracking tab for Tom here, we'll see that Tammy was automatically linked as his wife. And we can click on Tammy and we're right back into her profile. And under client management on the left here, I clicked on clients and you can see that Tammy and Tom are both in here as clients. So I'll go back into Tammy and back into tracking, and we'll add another relative. We'll give them a son, we'll name him Tim. Stick with the T theme. And we'll just give him a birthday too. Make sure you save that. And that's adding relatives. Next thing that we look at on the tracking tab is credit cards. We're just giving you a secure place to store credit cards here. We're not authorizing the card to make sure it's valid. We are not processing any charges. We are just giving you a secure place to store the cards. We follow all the requirements to be PCI compliant. We encrypt the database, encrypt the data at rest all the time. I'll show you how that works in just a second. You can see that this is clearly not a real credit card number. We just make sure that it could be a real credit card number. We can tell that it would be a Visa based on the digits. Anywhere there's an address field or set of fields, there will be a search box there. You can type in and pull up the address, or you can enter it manually. save that. You can enter multiple credit cards. It's encrypted. When you need to see it, just click on decrypt. As soon as you leave the screen, that unencrypted value is gone, so it always stays secure. And you'll see a little bit later where we log payments or track payments for client bookings. Then on the right over here, you can see spending. You can see spending just for Tammy, and you can see spending for all of Tammy's relatives. So you can make a trip for just Tammy, for just Tom, even just for Tim, or for any combination of them. Next, we'll look at uploading clients. So next to this Add Client button, this little symbol, the little down arrow pointing to a computer, this is our Import-Export button. And depending on the screen that you're on, sometimes you have an import, sometimes you have an export, sometimes you have both, like in this case. Just click on that to import clients. This link will give you a template. You don't have to use our template, but it usually works a little bit better if you use our template just because it's a format that we expect. And I have one here that we can look at. So just like in adding them manually, first name and last name is required. The rest of these fields aren't required. But if you do have other fields, especially the date fields, you need to make sure that these are valid date fields. If you have something like SEP.15, you can look at that and know that that's September 15th, but the computer doesn't know what SEP.15 is. So just make sure that this is a date that the computer would recognize. And somebody was just asking where to find that again. So we're under Client Management, and I clicked on Clients. And then right next to the Add Client button, click on this Import-Export button, and click on Import Clients. So here I'm just going to drag and drop my whole file right onto this box. And if your column names are the same as our column names, it will match up automatically. If yours are named a little bit differently, just click in here and choose which column it is. If you don't have one of the columns that we have, just choose unavailable, except for first name and last name, because those are required. And then click Import. Hopefully you get the nice green checkbox. If you got the nasty red X, then just go back and make sure you have first name and last name on all of your records. If you have any blank lines in your file, those look like a missing first name and last name, so make sure you don't have any blank lines in between records, and make sure your dates look valid. If everything looks right to you and it's still failed, just send it over to us. You can send the whole file to support@traveleasolutions.com. It's usually something really easy, but there's lots of really easy things that it could be when you're dealing with files like this. We see a lot of them, so we can usually find them pretty quickly. There's not any need for you to spend a lot of time trying to find something that we can find pretty quickly. Click Close, and see I imported all those clients. So if you're on another system, if you're on a different CRM, whether that's a general purpose CRM or a travel focused CRM, really all of them, with very few exceptions that we've found, can export your client list. They won't all necessarily export it into an Excel format like ours, but if you can get them exported, we can help you get those imported so you don't have to re-enter manually all that information. Okay, from clients, we're going to move on to creating a trip. So I'll pop back up to the dashboard here. There's several places you can create a trip in TESS. You don't need to remember all of these. I'll show you the one that I used last. You can create a trip from the Quick Links menu, from this Trips in Progress and Upcoming, and we'll come back and look at some of these things on the dashboard here after we have a little bit of more data in the system to make them a little bit more interesting. So you can click here and create a trip. You can create a trip from your clients, from here or inside your client list. There's a trip option. And there's a couple of other places actually that you can create them, but the one that I always use, I go to Trip Management, click on Trips, then click on the green and white icon there to create a trip. We'll be doing a regular trip. If we have some time, we might talk about group trips a little bit. We don't usually have time to get into those, but if anybody has specific questions about those, just let me know, and if we don't have time to get to it tonight, we can follow up on those afterward. We have a trip type. This is not super important. We use it for some reporting data, and we use it to help drive the automation that we won't be looking at too much tonight, but we'll talk about more in the advanced training session, the TESS for Experts session. Vacation's probably going to be your most common here. The trip description is pretty important. Your clients are not going to see this trip description. This is for you and for the agency. You want it to be something like this example down here. So have the client last name, or at least the primary client last name, something about the destination, and ideally a rough time frame for the trip itself. Why is that important? You are going to be getting paid for this. You're putting in a booking. We'll look at bookings in just a minute. And you'll put in a booking number that you receive from the supplier or wholesaler. And most of the time, the booking number that you put in will match up with the booking number on the commission check that comes in, and you get paid and everything's great. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes you could have a typo, or they could just not send the number, or sometimes there's multiple numbers and it's hard to tell which one's really the booking number that will be on the commission check. So having a trip description that makes it easy for the agency administrator to reconcile to your trip is pretty important. Or if you're reconciling your own checks, it's still pretty important. Okay, so we've got a name there, and we'll start adding to our trip. Now, everything we've done so far, including what we're about to do here, is all standard functionality. After we get some of this data in, we're going to look at the itinerary that we generated as kind of a side effect of the work that we're doing here, and the itinerary itself is an advanced feature, but I'll mention that again when we get there. So let's add a flight. We're leaving on April 8th. Here you'll just put in the airline code and the flight number. So in this case, we're flying Delta 2639 from Seattle to Orlando. We go out, it takes just a second because we're actually going out to a service provider, looking that up in real time. So right now, this is the live status for that flight. Of course, it's 6 months away, so hopefully it's not delayed yet. Add another flight. This is their return flight. That's from Orlando back to Seattle. And we're going to do a couple of things with this trip. They're actually going to go on a cruise toward the beginning of the trip. The cruise leaves on the 9th, so we need to put them in a hotel for that first night. Just for a single night. And they just need someplace to stay. This isn't the point of their trip, so we'll just put them in a little quinta that's convenient to Port Canaveral, where they'll be leaving on their cruise. If you know the room category, you can put that in as well. Then we'll add their cruise next. Their cruise leaves on the 9th. I'm not sure what the boarding time is, but we'll say 11 o'clock. And just like with the flights, we go out and look up the live information. How much information we have about the cruises varies a lot from cruise line to cruise line. So I'll show you what we get back on this particular Disney. Some places we get more, some we get less. Just depends on the cruise line. Put in a room category for the cruise line as well, for the ship. I've never been on this ship, but I hear it's nice. Get an ocean view for our client. And if you know the room number, they don't call them rooms on ships, do they? You can put that in here. Okay, so that will go until the 13th. So we need to put them in a hotel when they get back. So they're going to spend some time at Disney World after they get back. So from the 13th to the 20th, we can have them check in at noon. Their flight out is pretty early, so we want them to check out pretty early on the 20th. And we could put them in the Polynesian or Animal Kingdom Resort or somewhere nice on the property. You can see that there's an option here for choosing a primary part of the trip. This doesn't matter too much, but kind of like the trip type, it's what you'll see in your lists, and it's what will drive your automation if you have automation tied to this type of trip. So we'll say that the primary purpose of their trip is the cruise. I'll just mark that as primary. I'll go ahead and save that. If you don't get the green success here, go back and make sure your date formats are all valid. Make sure that you didn't miss anything. So when you added the second flight, make sure you didn't accidentally cross over the first flight into the second flight and get the dates wrong. Basic things like that. The first time I did this session after the update last week, I messed it up. I got my flights mixed up, just like I said not to do for you. And you know, when you're under the pressure of a demo, it was a really simple little mistake, but you know, I just couldn't see it in there, so I had a backup trip that I flipped over to another system and demoed from that one. But you know, it's usually just something really simple. So just if you get the error, just take your time and go back through your itinerary here and make sure everything maps out right. Okay, so we saved that, and we're going over to the Flights and Activities tab next. Now, this is that one of those areas that I mentioned is actually going to be changing in the next 2 days. The functionality that you have here will be similar. It'll actually be better. You'll be able to do more things. But most of these will actually move out into that front trip information page. So let's add our activity. We're going to get some tickets here. So they were starting, what, on the 14th for their tickets. And we'll call these Disney Park Hopper. Put in a confirmation number. Some text over here that I was supposed to copy in. Okay, that's not working. So I have a little blurb of text that's enjoy the parks with a little instruction on how to use the Disney buses and make sure you remember your fast pass times and things like that. And again, that's one of the things that will be changing. So a little blurb like that, just like I was trying to copy and paste from my file over here that I'm having trouble with, those are things that you probably type over and over again. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is making a place where you can save that. So you'll have little blocks of information where you can save that, you know, ticket information, the dining reservation. If you send people to specific restaurants all the time, you can have your own description of that restaurant that you can just pick from a drop-down list so you don't have to type that over and over again. After we released this functionality a couple of weeks ago, and our Claudio, who's the architect behind all of this, he's been spending a lot of time. He's done some really cool stuff here, but you know how you get something out in front of agents who are actually using it every day, and we immediately got some great feedback on things. So we're taking that feedback, turning around a quick update this week, so you'll see those features coming out really soon. Just save that. And now we'll go to our Invoice and Itinerary tab, and we want to look at the itinerary. Let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger. Okay, and the itinerary itself is going to be changing just a little bit, but not very much. Just like all of your templates, you'll have your custom logo. This is just a quick little logo I made up for this demo agency, and your agent information here. And we have this at a glance section, which is a brief summary of their trip. If you scroll down, we have a what we thought was a pretty cool little map, but in reality, it turns out it's just taking up space for people. So we'll be either taking that off or giving you an option to not include it. And then you go through your itinerary. You got your flight out, when it's landing, information about your La Quinta. From that first trip information page, you can click in and change this. So if you want a different picture as instead of this picture as the main one, probably don't care too much for the La Quinta, but you might care a little bit more for the Polynesian. You can change the property location description, the room description if you want to. The checkout time, cruise. So here's where I was talking about the cruise information. So we got a little blurb from Disney about this particular cruise. We didn't really get anything on the room category. We do have the schedule, so we know when it's in port. And we have a little bit of information about the ports. When they're at Castaway Cay, they have a sea day, and then they're back in Port Canaveral. So not a lot of detail on this particular cruise, but you get the basic information at least. And here's the Polynesian information. We didn't put a room category on that one. And their park hopper tickets with the confirmation number shows up there with the little description that you included. Their checkout, their flight out, their flight back. And it's a nice professional looking itinerary. I did forget, let's go back over to the trip information page. I kind of skipped an important part here. I didn't put a client on this. So let's add Tammy. She was one of our clients. You have two types of clients, a primary client and a secondary client. Really, that just means that the primary client is the person who's financially responsible for the trip. They're the one that you'll be sending invoices to. They're the one who's more than likely their credit card that you're using. Tom, I think we named him. And we can't forget Tim. You can have multiple primaries as well, so if you wanted Tom and Tammy to be primary here, that's perfectly fine. Okay, I'm going to come back and talk about the clients in just a second, but let's finish up with the itinerary that we were looking at. Go back to our itinerary here. So just click here to email the itinerary. Like I mentioned before, this part is an advanced feature. Adding all the information, tracking all of the information, that's all standard functionality, but actually sending out the itinerary is an advanced feature. Just click here to send it. That will go to the email address you have for her. And you can see the history here. You'll be able to see the history of invoices as well. We'll get to that in just a minute. You can come into the View menu here and export this to PDF. So if you want to print it out, mail them a copy of it, or you just want a copy for your file, or whatever you want to do with it. Maybe you want to send them a PDF version of it so that they have that locally instead of depending on the email. You can do that. So looks just like the itinerary. This is another one of those things that we're actually going to be updating this just a little bit in the next update. We tried to make it so that it looked just like the email and saved paper, so we ended up with some really tight line breaks on things. That was intentional, but one of those things that turned out most people didn't want it to work that way. So we'll be changing that a little bit. Okay, that's the itinerary. I had a couple questions come in here. So that is the $25 package, right? So let me go back to the trip information page. Everything I did here, the trip information, all of this travel information, the clients, everything I've done is standard, part of the $10 package. Just generating and sending that itinerary is part of the advanced package, which is the $25 a month package. Okay, we were going to talk a little bit more about our clients, our travelers here. So you see some things on Tammy. She has a little birthday cake, little wine glass, champagne glass, and you can see some listings here. So let's talk about these. Birthday cake, you can probably figure that out, means she has a birthday happening on the trip. Important for a couple of reasons, of course. One is obviously just that you might want to at least send them an email saying happy birthday, or you might want to send something to their room if they're at the resort on their birthday, if they're on the cruise ship, you might still be able to have something delivered to them. So that's just nice. Same with anniversary. For kids, birthdays can be different though. Same thing, you may still want to do something for them, but changing age on a trip could be important. We can see when his birthday is. We can see that he'll be 5 years, 11 months, and 29 days on the first day of the trip. So he'll be turning 6 during the trip. Probably not a big deal, but if he was 2 turning 3 or 11 to 12 or 12 to 13, sometimes for traveling and for restaurants and for parks, those ages can make a difference. So he may qualify for infant in arms on the way out, but not on the way back. He might qualify for discount ticket prices at the beginning of the trip, but not by the end of the trip. So just some things to be aware of, and this just gives you a little indication that you might need to keep an eye on that. Then here under Tammy, you can see that the itinerary we sent her is listed here. And again, we won't really look at the automation tonight, but if you have automation set up, then you'd see the future emails, the ones that are scheduled to go out in the future automatically, those would be listed here as well, so you can see that those are coming up. And of course, just like before, you can click on that to view the itinerary that was sent. Let's move on to bookings. I know it's going to feel a little bit like you just did all of the work for the booking. You shouldn't really need to enter a booking again on top of all of that. And we are looking at ways that we can integrate with suppliers and make this a little bit more streamlined. But right now, you do have to enter the booking separately, and that's because the booking and the itinerary items aren't necessarily going to match up one-to-one. So in our case, we might have a booking that would include their flights and the La Quinta stay. So let's create a booking for that. So your booking number is going to be the number you get back from the supplier. And we'll say we booked this with FunJet. I just use a date and time stamp here, so it's a unique number, just so I don't have duplicate booking numbers. And it's their flights and their hotels, so it doesn't need to be crazy expensive. Probably are making a commission on the flights, so it's probably a small commission on this. And here you can see, and this is an agency setting, so depending on how your agency is set up, you may not see this here, but most people will see what their breakdown is. So I'm an agent that gets 60% commission. This is the total commission that FunJet is paying on this booking, and this shows me what my breakdown is for that. $100 is coming in, I earn 60% of that, which is an easy calculation in this case. And booking description is an optional field. This is also just for your purposes. We'll say flights and hotel 1. And we'll create another booking. I have shortcuts for these things, but I get them wrong sometimes. And this one will be with DCL, Disney Cruise Line, for the cruise, obviously. And then we'll have a third booking. With Disney Parks and Resorts. That will be their resort, their tickets, and whatever. And of course, I'm just making up package prices and commissions here. So you can see we have several things in our itinerary, and we have several bookings, but the bookings and the itinerary items don't match up one-to-one. So that's why you add them independently. So now we have 3 bookings. We can see a summary. We can see how much they are. And we can go over to our invoice and take a quick look at what the invoice looks like. I like the detailed invoice here. So again, you can see your header. You can see some information about the trip, and you can see the bookings. Let's go into one of those bookings and take a payment. So I just clicked on the booking, I went to the bookings tab, then I clicked on the booking number, and I'm going to the payments tab, and I'll add a payment. Yep. Question came in, the booking is in the standard package. Yes, absolutely. The booking's in the standard package, the invoice is in the standard package. There's one thing about the invoice that I'll mention in the advanced package, but everything else is standard functionality. Almost everything I show you tonight will be standard. Really just that itinerary is the main thing. Just make an initial deposit here. Say $500. If you are tracking your credit cards in TESS, you can choose the credit card here. Again, we're not charging them. This is just so that you and they know what credit card was used, because they may have given you one credit card to use for flights and a different credit card to use for resorts based on miles and cash back and whatever. Save that. You'll see this start to break down. So we know that the package price was $4,500. They've made this $500 deposit. They have a $4,000 balance left. Let them make another payment. So if you have another system where you store credit cards, that's fine. Just make sure it's secure. Credit cards are sensitive. There's been a lot of trouble recently around, and not just recently, it's been a while, and probably it's happened to you too. I know it's happened to me a couple of times over the past year where a credit card number gets stolen, charges start showing up on my account. You don't want that to be because of something that you did, so just make sure if you're storing your credit cards for your clients somewhere that it's a secure system. We have a couple of charges in here now. These are payments that you made through the supplier system using their credit card, and you're just recording it here so that we can go back to the invoice. And mentioning the advanced package here, one of the features of the advanced package is the ability to create custom templates. So you see a bunch of things listed here, and if you are on the standard package, you won't see all of these. Actually, you won't see all of these no matter what, because you can see like this one, cool itinerary. This is one that I made just for this demo company. What you will see is the TESS invoice, the TESS invoice detail, and you'll see the itinerary if you're on the advanced package. So let's look at the invoice detail. Again, this is standard functionality. You can see the trip, the invoice, see the payments that were made. They can see their total, you can see their balance, and you can email this to your client. This is still standard functionality. Get the history, you can export this to PDF just like you can with the itinerary. The only piece of the whole invoice process that is advanced is if you want to create a custom template, so more than just your logo and your information. If you wanted to create a completely different template, the template designer is part of the advanced package. And if you want to create automation around it, so if you want to schedule invoices to be sent at specific intervals, that's part of the advanced package. Question, can you print the invoice without having to email it to the client first? Yes and no. So if you don't actually want it to go to the client, use this email test invoice here. That will send it to you. So here my demo agent is Ada. So it will still show up in this list, but it will show up that it went to me instead of to the client. You can click there and export it to PDF. So you still have to send it because we have to have a specific instance of it. We're looking at bringing that export to PDF over as an additional option in the preview mode as well. But for now you have to send it, but you can send it to yourself if you don't want your client to get it. Okay, so that's payments, that's itinerary, or invoices, sorry. Just looking at my list here. Okay, sorry. Let's look at some of the other features that you can have on a trip. We'll look at details just briefly. Details is kind of what we replaced with this new trip information system. You could, before you could, and you still can, paste information in here. So like the itinerary, if we have a, let me find my sample itinerary here. So here I have one from Disney, and I can copy and paste this in here. You can save that, and you can still do that. So if you get an email or copy from a web page or whatever, you just want to save all of that information, even if you have it detailed out on the trip page. You just want to have it here so that you can reference it, come back to it. You can still do that. These aren't going away, even though they've somewhat been replaced by the trip information, the new trip information screen, but these will still be here. And you can do the same with security information and flight information. A lot of people repurpose these. They use them for other things. I know one agency uses, I think it was the security information, they put dining information in there, which they shouldn't really need to do now with the new features, but that was what they were using for that before we added that feature. So that's an option for you. Coming over here to the Documents tab. So if you have that same itinerary, but it's a Word file in this case, or a PDF file, you can upload that, or maybe they emailed you a copy of their passport before they're leaving the country. You can upload that here. Just drag up the file, drop it on here, make sure you click the upload button. Want to make sure that progress bar goes. Then you have access to those anywhere. So we showed kind of what TESS looked like from your phone view. You could be at the grocery store or at the beach on vacation yourself, and your client calls and says, hey, I'm stuck in Italy. Good problem to have, but still a problem. I need a copy of my passport. Can you send me the image that I mailed you? You can open TESS on your phone, open that, send it to your client through email. We are going to be adding some features around our client portal later in the year where you'll be able to share documents with your client through the client portal, so you don't have to email sensitive documents. Emailing a passport's not ideal, but better than being stuck overseas. But you'll be able to share those securely. You can see here there's a shared with column that we're not using just yet, but you'll be able to share with your clients from here as well when we release the portal later in the year. So that's documents. Going over to notes. This is really just what you'd expect. So just every time you talk to your client, you can put in what they want. So chose dream departing 4/9. You, again, just like with the credit cards, you may have a system that already works well for you for this. The stereotype that we like to talk about is the spiral notebook. You probably have something analogous to a spiral notebook where you write down everything. And that's great. And if it works for you, that's great. But if you've ever gone on vacation and had to take 4 spiral notebooks with you because that's all the people that you have traveling right then, you know that that can be frustrating. So this is an alternative. Put all of your notes in here. If you are part of an agency where your agency owner or administrator may ever need to cover you when you're on vacation or out sick or something, they will love you if you put all of your notes in here, because if the client calls them and says, hey, what's going on with my trip? What's going on with whatever? They can come in and say, oh, well, I see you spoke to Ada back in October and you changed from the Polynesian to the Animal Kingdom Lodge. You can see, they can see why that happened. They can see what was going on if you put those in here. Tasks are something that can be created through automation. So in our advanced or test for experts session, we'll look at creating tasks through automation, which is actually a standard feature. It's not an advanced feature. We just don't look at that in the introduction class. But you can also create tasks manually. So you could have something like final payment due. So it would be like somewhere around there. What you can do with automation is set up a series of tasks that automatically get created based on your travel dates. So you could have a task that is final payment due 30 days before the trip start date that automatically gets created on all of your tasks, or all of your trips, rather. And when we go back out to our dashboard, you'll see some other places that tasks come up. And the timeline is the last thing we'll look at here. See a lot of information here. It's all kind of crammed together because we did everything all in one day. Usually you'd see this spread out over several days, but everything we did is here. We created the trip, we added the suppliers, added our flights, our resorts, our cruise, down to the note that we just added. This is, again, just a really easy way. Something happened, something changed. And this one's a little confusing because there's so much crammed in here, but you'd see that if we did just the trip information on one day and we added travelers on another day, just for example, you'd see those broken up into different day blocks there. And you can see a little overview. You can filter the timeline so you can tell what's happening there. Okay. So we aren't really going to have time to go into group trips very much, but I'll just touch on it at a really high level. You can create a group trip just like you create a regular trip. The difference is that you'll have trips within a trip. So each trip inside of that group trip we call a reservation. So you'll have this parent group that has all the same information on it, and you'll create the reservation, which is like a trip inside that group, and you'll create the bookings and everything just like you would for a trip. So that takes a little bit of getting used to, just an extra level in there, but if you do a lot of group trips, it's definitely worth organizing them that way. Let's go back out and look at our dashboard and see what's happened here. So we have a trip in progress upcoming now. It's still a ways out, but it's the next one that's happening for this agent. The task that we scheduled, you would have the tasks that are past due at the top and coming up due next, and then we only have one, so it's listed here. You can complete them right from the dashboard, or you can click here to go to the task, or click here to go to the trip. See our month-to-date and year-to-date sales, which happen to be the same because we only have one trip. Haven't received any commissions yet, but those will be coming soon. And here you can see our chart. This is an empty chart, kind of a sad little chart. But once you get some history in TESS, which we can do by loading your past history if you have that in a format that we can help you import. But you can see that there's this blue line that there's nothing there, it's 0. But that would be last year's sales, and the yellow line is this year's sales. So you can come in and really easily see how this year is comparing to next year. And same with your commission received. Going down our list here, we won't look at the inbox tonight. The inbox is how you'll know you've received a payment from your agency owner, if that's how you receive payments. If you are reconciling checks and paying yourself, then you wouldn't really ever use that. The calendar is pretty cool. Some people just work better from a calendar view. So I can come out to March and see that I have a task due. I can come to April and see that I have this trip. That can be useful. Again, just some people like to work that way. I can look at the day view and see what I have going on for that day. But if there's a hurricane coming, which we've had a lot of experience with lately, we're here in Jacksonville, Florida, so we got off easier than we expected, but still had some problems from the storm. But if you had people in Orlando during that time, you need to know that. So you can come to your calendar, see who you have traveling right now when there's a problem like that. Unfortunately, if you had people traveling to Las Vegas right now, you would want to see who you have traveling. If they're anywhere in the region, you might want to reach out, see if they need any help. So you have the calendar view, you have the task view, which is this same task. Again, it's just a different way of looking at the same information, just different ways that different people like to work. Coming down to commission, here you'll be able to see all of the checks that you've received from your agency. Again, if you receive checks that way. My Next Check is a pretty cool feature. It lets you see, based on what your agency has reconciled, what you would make right now if today was payroll. So you can see proactively if your commission checks have come in and been reconciled against your bookings. If you aren't sure if you're going to get paid for something, that's a good way to come in and see what's going on with your bookings. Suppliers, your tour operators, these are the companies that you are creating the bookings with. It's not necessarily where they're going. So this would be Disney Cruise Line. This could be FunJet or Classic. Whoever is going to be issuing that check. That's what you'll use on the booking tab, and that's what's here. And if you're missing one, you can click the green button that's not right where my cursor is. This is an agency setting, and my demo agency has this turned off for agents. And that's just to keep from duplication. You can imagine Walt Disney Parks and Resorts, how many different versions of Disney Parks and Resorts, Disney Parks ampersand Resorts, how many different versions of that you could end up with if everybody's creating their own. So most of the ones that you'll need are in here. If you are an administrator, you can add them yourself. If you are an agent and that button's there, that means that your administrator wants to do that for you. So just let them know and they'll get those created for you. Properties, we saw in the itinerary some information about the property. But you can also just kind of come out and browse around and see things that you like. This is one of my partners' preferred properties. Airlines are airlines. We don't have as much information about those, but and then the cruise line information as well. Then just a couple of last things to look at. Reports are important. Projected income, commission earned, and past due. So what do these tell you? Projected income tells you what money you have coming in. So if you want to make sure that you're going to get paid for something, come out and make sure it's on your projected income report. Ideally, you're putting your trips and your bookings in as they happen, as you book them, not waiting until you expect that check to come in. But if you forget or something, you can come to your projected income report. Just make sure that it shows up in the time frame that you expect to get paid for it. Commission earned will show you what you've actually received for those. Your past due report is really important. This tells you things that TESS thinks you should have been paid for, but that you haven't had a check reconciled against your bookings for. So whether you're part of an agency that's doing that or you're doing that yourself, this makes it easy to make sure you're getting paid for everything. It's really easy with those little bookings, little bed and breakfast that's not part of a supplier. You might have to follow up with them. If it's a $50 commission, you may not always remember to do that, but if you put those bookings in TESS, they'll always be on your list. It will be easy to follow up on those. Charts are cool. Just shows you kind of where you're sending people. And by country, we only have the one country for this agent. All of that standard functionality. Looking at the details of the properties, I apologize, the details of the properties and the cruise lines, you can use those in your trips, but researching inside those is part of the advanced package. All of this is standard functionality except custom reports. Those are an advanced feature. Basically any data that's in the system, we can build into a custom report for you. We have to set it up the first time, but then you can run it anytime yourself after that. The templates and marketing we look at in the TESS for Experts class. And the last thing we'll look at here is the help desk. So if you have a problem, you can create a ticket here. We'll follow up. You'll see comments listed underneath your ticket. If you don't like tickets, you can just email, or if you're not able to get into the system, you can just email support@travelysolutions.com, whichever way you prefer. That's the address there, support@travelysolutions.com. A lot of people think that's easier for them. It's easier to attach files. You can attach files here as well, but people are just comfortable with email. So whichever is easier for you is fine. Okay, that's everything on our agenda for tonight. I know we're actually a couple of minutes over, but I'm happy to hang around and answer questions if anybody